Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing really well. I'm excited for this AMA today, and I'm looking forward to hearing everybody's thoughts and feedback and questions. And I have to say, out of all the AMAs, this one should bring a lot of clarity to a lot of big questions, a lot of exciting alpha associated with core gameplay, and I think it'll help really, help kind of give context to the value of land within our ecosystem, give value in the context of what like Skyfall might mean in terms of gameplay and in terms of owning land within the metaverse. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it all. So just to kick things off, looking back and listening to Dan's AMA he had earlier last week, something he said was everything we do is incredibly well thought out. And just to set the tone for this, for this AMA, there have been countless hours of work put into going back and forth in terms of building a scalable gameplay model that incorporates not just, the blockchain and smart contracts and how we're going to basically make all of this work, but it also speaks to the fact of how we can build a game that's scalable not just for the Web3 space, but for kind of mass adoption, for something that people over the world that love sports, that love fantasy sports, that love horse racing would find really, really exciting and would want to get involved with. And when you're trying to balance all of these things, there are so many different approaches and use cases you could do that could build a really great game. A game that stands the test of time, because we've seen a lot of play to earn games, if you will, that have not been able to withstand, all these difficulties. And as Dan will get into in his AMA later this week, as he talks about the economy, everything we're doing is really thought out and put a lot of time into to create a scalable model that'll be, really, really great for an MVP release, but also over the long term, as we build a game that we believe to be, game changing. It'll be something that, horse racing enthusiasts, fantasy, player enthusiasts, and Web3 enthusiasts will find really, really exciting and offer a really unique value proposition to the space, as we all here know is being built and developed. So just to set the context, everything I'm about to talk about has been put in a ton of hours of time and work, and I'm excited to get into it and share with you kind of what the overall gameplay will look like for land, stables, and farms. So just for context to get everything started, our assets in our game are all interconnected. What I mean by that is we know the avatar is your identity, but it's also your distinct coat of arms. So the way that an avatar interacts with your horse, the way that your avatar interacts with your farm and your stable, there's interconnected pieces. On top of that, the way that horses interact with farms is also really interesting, because horses are going to be living on these farms, right? And there's a relationship between where a horse lives and the land that it lives on. So on a high level, right, the way that things kind of interact with each other is something that we have to think about as we build, and how we kind of manage that from the blockchain side to the gameplay side, and how that works in a market with a bunch of liquidity, right? Where you have open tradable markets, and how our assets are going to be easily bought and traded, but then also managing how those assets will live and function within our platform is a whole nother piece to balance. Because if you own a horse in a farm and that farm gets sold, what happens to the horse, and so on and so forth. So I'm about to get into all those details, how the land and farms will work, how they interconnect with our assets in the game. And I think it'll show kind of the context to the value of these pieces of assets in our game, whether it be land, a horse, a racehorse, or an avatar. But really, it's a model that will speak to how all these pieces work with one another. So to get things started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak about core land gameplay. Land gameplay as it relates to farms and stables. And then after I go over the core gameplay of how all these things work, I will touch on Skyfalls, and it'll help set the stage for kind of, the value of Skyfalls, and it'll bring it all together. So to kick things off, as we all know, the Silk's metaverse consists of 202,500 acres of land. So that's a 450 by 450 grid, each of which has its own coordinates, so that each acre could be plotted in its respective location on the actual map. Within our game, from a gameplay perspective, there are two different roles, if you will, you could play within the gameplay. You could become a land developer, which is someone who wants to buy land, develop land, and create a dynasty of racehorses that live within that land. But then there's also a whole piece of becoming a land speculator, someone who will essentially understand the behavior on the game map, speculate on where land will become a hot commodity or where people would want to further build and grow their dynasties, and will be able to charge a premium for coveted pieces of lands that might be cutting people off from development, or creating value for themselves in terms of how they hold their assets, hold their pieces of land, and manipulate kind of the map in that way. So the first thing I'm going to touch on is a land developer. And a land developer is really the core essence of building a business, if you will, within our game. So the first things first is contiguous acres of land. What does it mean for land to be contiguous? So for a parcel to be considered contiguous, it must share a border with another parcel, right? Parcels that share corners, meaning they're the points on the top right and left and bottom right and left, those are not considered contiguous. It needs to have the actual base in the side of the square for it to be considered contiguous. So for 1 acre of land, there are a total of 4 contiguous pieces of land that share borders with that acre. And when you have contiguous acres of land, those 2 pieces of land can be combined together to form a larger combined piece of land. The way that it works is as follows. Just so we all understand the context, each piece of land is going to have properties, right? Attributes associated with the acre. Similar to how an avatar has properties, each acre of land will have its own properties as well. The thing about land in our game, which is important to know, is that the properties of acres of land in the Skyfalls region, and for the primary scope of the game, is based on the region itself, meaning Skyfalls, just for context, is a total of 25,000 acres. Each acre in Skyfalls has the same properties, the same traits as one another. So it's not like you're going to buy an acre of land in Skyfalls here and an acre of land in Skyfalls here, and each of them will have different rarities, right? The rarity for each one is the same. That's how it works in Skyfalls. And the reason why it works like that is because when you're combining pieces of land, for them to have different rarities would create an additional layer of friction and complexity associated with combining the acres. So a lot of value associated with developing land is going to be associated with the regions you decide to develop land in. And each region will have its own properties that make it beneficial for buying and developing land within that region. The first property associated with land is the parcel size, right? How large is this 1 acre of land in terms of the one parcel is a 1 acre, and kind of the parcel size as it's allocated and structured, right? A property will be its parcel size. Additionally, you'll have coordinates which correspond to the exact location this piece of land is located on the map. And additionally, you will have zoning regulations. Now, zoning regulations is something I'm going to speak to right now, but it's really a big piece of land gameplay that is really interesting. So we've introduced, which was not originally on the white paper, but it's going to be released in a gameplay document shortly, and it's going to bring a whole new dimension to the game, which I think is really exciting. 2 different types of farms: a private farm and a public farm. A private farm is a farm where only the farm owner is able to house their horses. A public farm is a farm where the farm owner is able to invite or accept offers from other horse owners to place their horses in this person's farm. And it functions as a normal farm did in the white paper, where now these horse owners are all sharing in the collective profits of these horses. But the farm owner of the public farm is able to set a housing fee, or we call it a stabling fee, for housing those horses, and essentially making money every time one of those horses in the public farm wins a race or breeds. Zoning regulations, which is a property of land, right, in different regions, is going to basically specify how many acres contiguous acres are required to create a private farm, and how many contiguous acres are required to create a public farm. Now, standard gameplay requires that a public farm, just like the white paper, requires 10 acres of contiguous land to be combined in order for it to be considered a public farm and to house other horse owners' horses. Private farms, on the other hand, do not need to be 10 acres in size. Depending on the region in the map that you house land, will impact the amount of land that you need to combine as contiguous acres in order to have the housing functionality of putting your horse on that land. The reason we brought about kind of private farms was because when you think about essentially onboarding new users or friction, right, of getting involved in the game, there are all these variables involved with, right, earning actual payouts or rewards, right? You need to have an avatar in order to earn racing rewards. So that's a must to begin with. But then on top of that, right, there's a whole housing fee associated with where your horse is going to live, right? When you buy a racehorse, where's that horse going to be living on the map? Are we going to require that you buy 10 acres of land, combine them, and then you could finally house your horse? So what we did is we instituted essentially this private farm functionality where now all of a sudden, depending on the region of the map that your land is housed in, even 1 acre of land might be incredibly valuable to an owner because now they'll be able to have utility associated with that 1 acre by turning that 1 acre into a farm, into a private farm, and housing their horse. So just to reiterate again, an attribute associated with land in different regions is the zoning regulations of that land. That zoning regulation can regulate essentially, is the requirement for this region to have 10 contiguous acres for a private farm, right? Is the value something else? And how many acres is required in this region for me to create a private farm? So that kind of sets the value of land in relation to housing horses and how you build a business around housing horses, which I'll get into in a little bit. An additional property for land is hidden attributes. Land on different regions in the map may have different hidden attributes associated with the land. An example of a hidden attribute could be a structure that's embedded on that actual land. Now, what I'll get into in a moment is how you actually convert a piece of land into a farm. And a piece of land might have embedded on it a structure, for example, like a stable or an estate or other structures that could have gameplay implications that really make the land more valuable to the owner of that acre. So hidden attributes associated with land on the map as a property of that land can make that land a lot more valuable considering the fact that it's coming with extra utility housed on the land itself. Additionally, land may have additional resources, right, that are living on the land or that are, being grown on the land that can yield valuable rewards in the future. And those rewards can be very meaningful in relation to core gameplay and, potentially payouts. And they could be a meaningful piece of developing and building a farm in a specific region of the map. So just for the context of what we're talking about here, land gameplay, and particularly land development, is about building farms that could be private farms, but ultimately scaling and building a dynasty of farms that could be public farms of 10 acres. And then as I get into private and public farms in particular, which I'll dive into in a moment, you'll learn, or I think we're all aware of some of the core gameplay, but how development works from scaling from a 10-acre farm all the way up to a 100-acre public farm. The next piece I'll touch on are stables. So I just went over land as it functions as 1 acre, right? The properties associated with 1 acre. Now I'm going to dive into how stables work within the Silks, right, ecosystem. Stables are used to take that piece of land and to actually convert it to a farm. Meaning, the land might have a property that says this farm could become a private farm at 1 acre. So right now that farm is 1 acre in size. You could actually turn it into a farm and put a horse on that farm. The thing is, when you go into the game and you click convert to farm, it's going to ask you, which stable are you going to use right now to put on this piece of land and finalize the farm creation process to now house a horse? Because a stable must be on the actual land for you to house a horse on that land. As I mentioned, some farms, some land might include structures embedded on the property. So for example, if a piece of land was 1 acre in size, had a zoning regulation of 1 acre of a private farm, and had a stable as an embedded structure as an attribute for that land, that piece of land itself could be turned into a private farm with zero cost to the owner of that land. It's quite valuable because instead of you needing to go out and buy a stable to convert it to a farm, the piece of land itself has all the requirements you need to turn it into a farm. Now, what are the benefits of owning stables in the game? Because if all you need is a stable to change a farm into a private or public farm, are there any additional value or properties associated with stables as it relates to gameplay, right, within the platform? And the answer is yes. Stables are not going to just be an aesthetic benefit associated with developing farms, right? Obviously, within the metaverse and within Web3, there's a whole component of rarity, of clouds, of visual identity, right, associated with the assets that you own and their uniqueness. And as it relates to our Genesis avatars, obviously there's a component of rarity, and additionally there will be a component of visual, aesthetic, kind of rarity associated with stables within the game that we do ultimately sell. But visual representation doesn't necessarily impact directly utility or functionality within the platform. Stables do involve specific properties that when you combine them with a farm, they will allow the user to set requirements for their farm for how they essentially will accept horses that get entered into that farm, which I'll get into right now. So in the past, when we spoke about housing horses on farms, obviously the benefit of owning a public farm is the fact that you could house other people's horses in the farm and basically set a fee as the farm owner for what it would cost those horse owners to put their horse in your farm. For MVP, as we're developing, which everyone will learn more and more about in the coming weeks in terms of where we're at in the development process and the excitement associated with the near future of the MVP, is that we're going to be releasing an MVP that's going to have a lot of this core gameplay incorporated in it and really help set the launch pad for this, for the starting gate of this platform, which is really exciting. For the MVP, it's really important that the game itself does not create too much friction and too much complexity that could, one, limit us from the development timeline, and two, limit us from onboarding new users and really scaling the platform moving forward. That being said, right now what I'm going to get into is the way that you house horses on your farm and you set fees for your farm from core MVP gameplay. So I'm going to get into right now housing horses and how that relates to, one, the piece of land you're housing it on, and two, the farm you're creating with a stable that you're connecting with a piece of land. So originally we had a term called staking, which was like, staking and pooling. And we are releasing a glossary of terms that will create, a lot of clarity around how terminology is used in our game and what they particularly mean. But right now I'm going to simplify a big piece where there might have been complexity, which was the relationship between staking and pooling. And we're actually removing those terms from the equation. In traditional, DeFi or Web3, staking might refer to the fact that you take an asset and you remove it from your wallet, and you basically are essentially hodling it for a given period of time in order to receive rewards. The thing about staking is you actually remove liquidity from the equation because you're taking the asset out of your wallet and you no longer have the freedom to sell it in an open market or in the secondary market, right? So what we're doing is we're actually allowing for our users to have liquidity within our platform, and we're not creating the situation where you're staking a horse in a farm and now losing the ability to sell that horse or have the freedom of, essentially adjusting your strategy within the game as it relates to that horse, which I'll get into. So we're using a term called stabling. Stabling is the act of housing a racehorse on a farm. Okay? Stabling in a private farm is just taking your horse and putting it on your private farm. Stabling in a public farm allows you to take that horse and put it in a public farm and collectively share in the profits of other horse owners as you put it in the farm. The thing about stabling, as I get into public farms, is that you're actually not taking that horse NFT and putting it in the farm itself in terms of like removing it from your wallet. What's happening is we're adjusting one of the properties of the horse and the farm to reflect the fact that this horse is now living in that farm, and you can now freely sell that horse on the secondary market. Now that horse owner, though, that's bought it from you will own that horse, and that horse will still be stabled in that farm depending on the stabling agreement you got into with that owner. But stabling, just from the terms, is taking a horse and putting it inside of a farm, whether it be a private farm or public farm. As I get into public farms, I'll talk about how stables impact the actual farm creation process. And as I get into private farms, I'll talk about kind of the stabling process as well. So what I'll do right now is I'll dive into private farms, then public farms, and I'll bring it all full circle in terms of how land, stables, and farms connect to each other. So private farms consists of contiguous acres, and from just, I'd say, standardization of gameplay, right? Regions will differ in terms of their zoning rights, which will impact this, but private farms are up to 9 acres in size, meaning, the zoning rights might allow for you to take 1 acre and turn it into a private farm, but as you combine contiguous acres all the way up to 9 acres, those will all be considered private farms, okay? When you combine a 10th acre to that 9-acre private farm, it will automatically become a public farm, now allowing other people to request to put their racehorse in your farm. The thing is, you could still treat your 10-acre public farm as a private farm by either disabling the public farm functionality or just rejecting all stable requests or ignoring the requests altogether. So as a user, as you develop your dynasty, whether it be a 10-acre public farm, a 30-acre public farm, whatever it is, you have the freedom of deciding whether or not you want to allow a horse to be put on your farm, right? Down the road, you might be able to set, for example, my public farm is open to anybody, and someone could just come in and put their horse on your farm. But for MVP, you're going to have the decision to basically decide yes or no to stable requests. An owner of a private farm can only put their horses in that farm. Now, as we know, a user is going to be able to syndicate their racehorse. So as long as, and when you syndicate a racehorse, you're essentially going to get, as we get into syndication, which we'll have an AMA on, you're going to get 10 NFTs for MVP. You're going to get a governance token NFT, which essentially allows you to make the decisions around where you're putting the horse. And then you're going to have a partnership token, 9 partnership tokens, which essentially relates to the pro rata share in that horse when it wins races, but there's no decision making associated with the partnership tokens. As long as you own a private farm, and you own the governance tokens of those horses, you could put them in the private farm, and then you could still have people who own the partnership tokens related to those horses. But you as the private farm owner must own the actual governance token of a horse in order to put it in your private farm. Okay? As I mentioned, there's going to be liquidity associated with these assets. So when you put your horse on your private farm, it now is going to have your horse and the metadata of that farm. So the farm's properties might be, for example, stall 1, stall 2, stall 3, depending on the size of the farm. And you'll be able to essentially have it say the name of your horse because you've now stabled it inside your private farm. If you sell that horse or you sell that private farm, the relationship will be cut off at the sale, and the horse will be removed from the farm, from the private farm, and the farm will become emptied of any racehorses. So the private farm relationship between horses and farms is stuck to the owner of both assets. The moment that relationship is cut off, the relationship between those assets is removed as well. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this AMA, there's a relationship between assets within our platform. So the way we're managing those relationships is through the actual properties of those assets, in order to keep liquidity in the markets open for everyone who owns these assets. I'm now going to dive into public farms. And just before I dive into public farms, to create additional clarity, because there's a lot of pieces here and I'm sure that there's a lot of questions. But as you, just to retrack, as you buy a piece of land in the map, 1 acre piece of land, that land will tell you can turn it into a private farm. It'll ask you for a stable in order to turn it into a full private farm. The piece of land itself might have an embedded stable incorporated in the land, in which case it'll be a default option, so you don't have to worry about it. Or you might be able to connect the stable to the private farm and turn it into a 1 acre private farm. You might be asking, well, what if my stable has 10 stalls on it? So I'm combining an NFT of a stable which has 10 stalls to a 1 acre plot of land, right? 1 acre piece of land. But it's only 1 acre private farm. How many horses can I house in that farm? The way that it works is there's a direct relationship between the amount of acres of land that are contiguous and combined and the amount of horses you could house on that farm. So if you did combine a stable, for example, to a piece of land, and it was only a 1 acre farm, you could only house 1 horse. Only one of those stalls will be available to house a horse. The moment you combine another acre of land to that farm, it becomes a 2 acre private farm and you can house 2 horses. So it's 1 acre per horse, and as you create larger and larger farms, you can house more and more horses. Although the stable NFT itself might visually have the appearance or even the functionality of housing multiple horses, you will be restricted from housing more than the amount of acres of land that are combined of horses in that actual stable in your farm. And that's just for clarity. So, for example, when you have a 10 acre or when you have a 3 acre private farm and you have 3 horses on it, the moment you sell one of the horses, the horse will be removed from the private farm and only be 2 horses on it. Or the moment you sell the farm itself, all 3 horses will be removed from the farm and the farm will be emptied of horses and the new owner will now own that private farm. Now, if you created a private farm and you combined your stable NFT into that farm and you sold that farm, that new farm owner will be able to deconstruct that farm that was created and essentially own not just the individual acres of land, because it was a 3 acre private farm, so 3 acres of land, but they'll also own the individual stable NFT. So when you're selling that asset, you're actually selling a bunch of wrapped assets at once that are part of that one asset that the new owner will now own within the sale. So that's just an important note to have, which is like, well, if I bought a stable on the market that's really rare and I put it into a farm and I'm selling the farm, the value of that farm is not just, the land, but it's also that valuable stable that's incorporated in the land as well. Right now I'm going to dive into public farms. I haven't been able to read the chats. Is there any confusion around particular topics right now that you guys want me to answer? Because it might be helpful because this is a lot of content. So I don't know if there's any particular questions that I should hop into right now that I think will help create clarity before we move on to public farms. Okay, so stable pricing I see real quick. So stable pricing. So what I'll say right now, and there's a lot of alpha, and then there's a lot of implied alpha that I think everyone will get from this call. And there's going to be a lot of excitement once the Skyfall's redemption happens. But I think just over the course of this call, and as you look at the gameplay document, it'll become fairly clear kind of what some of the benefits of Skyfalls are, right? And I'll take it from there. Stable pricing. So some pieces of land will have embedded structures. That could include a stable, which is going to be incredibly valuable. In terms of stables, we have a roadmap right now that includes the horses, right, happening at the end of this month, the first sale of our yearlings. I'm not going to touch on stable pricing because I'll just put it like this. For right now, in terms of core gameplay functionality for MVP, the founding members of our community, the ones that we appreciate so greatly that are making this all happen, are going to get a lot of the early adopter benefits associated with gameplay. And that should answer some questions associated with stables. And then in terms of stable pricing down the road, obviously there'll become more lavish stables, some stables that have additional functionality. One thing I'll mention, right, there's a lot of companies in this space that are building metaverses. One metaverse I particularly, have been a fan of um, is on Cyber. They've done stuff with CloneX, with Artifact, but what they're doing is they're creating these kind of these enclosed structures that you can basically display your NFTs. There's a lot of interoperability, a lot of customization. A big piece in our game that is going to allow you to build a dynasty, but also allow you to build a metaverse hub for you to invite your friends and to congregate around, right? There's that whole social component to it. Is going to be building massive, dynasties, building and developing farms, but then having estates. And estates will allow you to basically have these, locations to house your art. But something that's really interesting is that some stables might actually have really, really meaningful, functionality, because not only will they house horses, they might have beautiful wings to the stable that allow you to host events or have customization of your NFTs. So there's a lot of visual utility or metaverse functionality that's going to become quite valuable associated with stables that'll make them rare. But then also, as I'll get into right now, when you're setting the properties of your farm, meaning how much do I take as a farm owner when your horse wins a race? What's the stabling fee? Those properties you're going to set are actually going to be impacted by the stable that you use in the process, which I'll get into right now. So when you're developing a farm and you're thinking about your strategy around what racehorses you're putting in your farm and how you're going to essentially monetize that farm, you might decide to use one stable over another for your particular strategic gameplay. So there will be some of that incorporated in it as well. And I see someone's asking if they could host parties. I'm telling you right now, down the road, we'll be hosting these AMAs in some of these farms, in some of these magnificent stables in the States. So there'll be many, many parties. So just to get into public farms now, just focusing on private farms, they're exclusive to the owner of the farm, but I think it kind of allows for onboarding of a lot more users by restricting the capital requirements of building, pretty large farm in order to house your horse. But I'll get to public farms right now. So public farms, and this is, something that Dan loves as well, they're like gamified businesses. They're like storefronts, if you will. Because depending on how well you develop your farm within the game as a farm owner and as a stable manager, you're going to be able to validate not just the purse rewards that you've made over your career or over, the gameplay, how well you rank among all the other players and how you're honored within our platform, which you'll learn about quite shortly within the metaverse, which is going to be major for not just your business, right? But for recognition and for prestige. That's really exciting. But as you develop farms and kind of prove the fact that you're able to curate incredible stables of racehorses, people are going to look to you not just to put their horses in your farm, but to come to your farm to buy horses from you. So farms could actually act as storefronts, right? Where you're offering particular thoroughbred bloodlines in this farm, where you're narrowing risk profiles by basically aggregating particular racehorses in particular farms by saying that this is the farm for this purpose and this is the farm for that purpose and this is how I'm choosing to build my farm. And you're basically building a store. Or you could build, farms that are kind of geared towards micro communities and geared towards diversifying your risk through bringing other horse owners in and sharing in the profits with them, right? And you might choose to be a farm owner that completely takes the risk off the table, meaning you don't even own any horses. You're just saying, let me own a farm, let me house other people's horses, and let them take on the risk of horse ownership, and I basically take on the risk of owning land. But if you'd have to think about risk, owning a public farm in our game really removes a lot of the horse ownership risk associated with it, because you essentially own this land. There's a limited quantity of land within our metaverse. And as the game progresses over the next, tens of years, you're going to have this piece of land that essentially could, depending on your gameplay and how skilled you are, create passive income for you over time as you monetize housing these horses. The beautiful thing about public farms is the fact that when you do put a horse in a public farm, you share in the collective profits of other horses within that farm. When you stable them, you share in the collective profits of those horses. And as I'm sure you all know, I'm pretty excited about this. I mean, I think it's going to take fantasy sports to the next level, because instead of just competing against your friends, you're now going to be collaborating with your friends. It's going to bring a whole new dimension to a global fantasy game that hasn't existed before. And I think it's going to be really, really special as you think about thoroughbred horse racing and kind of micro communities as it relates to Web3, as we're seeing these partnerships that are happening this week with Vayner Sports and with Knights of Degen. So there's a whole side to that that's amazing. But also as it relates to to building kind of something with your collective friends and with partnerships and with people you met on the server that is going to really be exciting and bring a whole new dimension to community that hasn't really been in the metaverse before. So I think that's really, really great. So let me dive into kind of how stables, as I mentioned before, impact public farms. So when you are creating a farm, you're going to essentially have to combine it with a stable. And a stable will have properties. Some of the properties of the stable might be the stabling period, meaning when you're setting the requirements for your farm, the way that we set it up for MVP, which I think is going to reduce friction and reduce complexity and support kind of the game progressing, is the fact that the fee you set is going to apply to everyone who puts their horse in your farm. Meaning you can't say I'm taking 5% from this horse and then 10% from that horse. The reason being because if you essentially create a public farm of 10 acres, so it could house 10 horses, and you accepted the first horse at 5%, and then the next horse comes in and you say 10%, that's not fair to the original horse owner because now the amount of money they can make from the other person's horse is reduced, but the other person can make more money from their horse because the 5%, right, will be a lower fee in the overall purse. 10% will be a higher fee, and now, the amount of money you're making from a equitable standpoint is not fairly distributed across all horse owners. So in order to reduce the complexity of kind of managing all of these things for MVP, the way that it's going to work is you're going to create a farm, and you're going to set two things, depending on the range you're going to be able to set based on the stable itself. One, the stabling period. How long am I going to be able to stable this horse in my farm for? How long is the agreement between the farm owner and the horse owner? That could be 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it is between the farm owner and the horse owner. The next fee is going to be the stabling fee, right? I'm going to charge 5%. I'm going to charge 4.9%. There's going to be a range you could set. And similar to how people compete, obviously, right, on the secondary market with undercutting, floor prices or whatever it is, we're not going to set like a standardized 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% fee. We're going to allow there to be competition in terms of the fee that you're going to be setting. But the stable is going to impact the actual minimum and maximum thresholds of the fee you could actually set. So now that'll create a whole nother layer to what stables you want to use, what regions you might want to develop in that help contribute to the farm that you want to build, and how you're going to entice or incentivize other horse owners to put their horses in your farm. Once a racehorse is stabled in a public farm, the first time it's stabled in, you've set all your requirements, the stabling period, the stabling fee. Once the first racehorse is stabled in the farm, you cannot change the stabling fee, right? Or the stabling period of that farm until the racehorse has been removed from that farm. So once the farm becomes empty, now you could actually change the requirements of that farm and change it again. As I'll get into though, don't think that, I just set a 2-year period and I just accepted one horse and now I'm going to have to wait 2 years for that horse to be removed before I could change anything. That would become incredibly burdensome. It would impact, the flexibility of being able to adjust your strategic gameplay on any given day. And we're going to basically, as I'll get into right now, we've adjusted the model so that you could essentially destable a horse from your public farm, but you're going to have to pay a fee in order to do so. And I'll get into the exact specifications around that. But that being said, now all of a sudden, if you wanted to change your entire gameplay, you could destable the horses, adjust your farm settings, and then restable horses as people come and request to do so. But obviously, you might think, well, if I'm going to destable a horse, it might hurt the horse owner, might hurt the horse owner. But as you'll see, we're making it quite a meaningful system for both parties in terms of how that would work. Okay, what I'm going to get into right now is just bring everything full circle. Private farms are your own horses. Public farms are allowing other horses to come in. The actual, I'd say, UI UX of creating a farm. As you'll see in the really one of the first development updates that's coming up in the next couple weeks, you're going to see some of the actual game UI UX. And we've been progressing really nicely with the gameplay. Once you see the core kind of visuals of the game map, of how you're going to be able to search and develop farms, how you're going to be able to look at your horses, your avatars, right, everything, you'll see that there's going to be a step for you to basically convert your land into a farm. And the step works in the following process, both for private farms and then for public farms. So when a user owns contiguous acres of land, and the land itself has zoning rights that allow you to convert it to a farm, there will be a button on the farm in the game that basically says, right, convert this piece of land into a farm. Once you click that button, it'll pop up the stable that you want to use to move forward with the actual farm creation process. If it has an embedded stable in the farm, you'll be able to choose that as a default option in this flow. If it does not, you're going to need to have purchased a stable NFT from the secondary market or from the company, and you're going to be able to use that NFT to create this farm. And when you do that, which I'll get into right now, how it technically works, the stable will be used to help create the farm. Once you choose the stable, you'll be prompted to now name your farm. Naming your farm is a big deal because it's going to impact search functionality in terms of how people are going to be searching for your farm on the marketplace or on our map. You're going to be able to put a description of your farm, so a user gets kind of a brief overview of the purpose of your farm, whether you're curating horses for sale or you're looking for people to put their horses in your farm, and your background, why you're qualified to be the stable manager who owns this farm that's going to manage the horses and essentially do their best to curate a champion dynasty. And then you'll be prompted to enter your racing silks with your farm. As we mentioned, all these assets interconnect. The horse interconnects with the farm, the farmer interconnects with the horse, but even more than that, the avatar, the silks interconnect with everything in the game. So when you're creating the farm, it's going to ask you to choose the avatar that you'd like to associate the farm with. The racing silks that will be draped on the front of these farms. And they obviously serve as kind of your company logo or your team logo, if you will. They're your crest, they're your dynasty. You can't create a farm unless you have racing silks, unless you have an avatar, right? So avatars become critical within core gameplay. And you'll basically assign your silks to your farm. Once that's done, you've now created all you need to create a private farm. But if you had a 9-acre farm and now you're going to 10 acres, it's going to now prompt you for additional public farm setup requirements. And it'll look at the stable you chose and it'll now set the kind of the minimum and maximum values you could set for that public farm. First one will be the stabling length, as I mentioned, right? How long are horses that are going to be put on my public farm going to be stabled for? Next, it's going to mention the stabling fee. So, right, how large is the fee that I'm taking from each horse after it wins a race? And then third, what is the destabling fee? And this is going to be an interesting thing because obviously with blockchain, there's a whole component of trust, right? You trust 51% of the network, but within the game, there's this whole component of trust as well in terms of trusting the stable manager to curate incredible horses with your horse, right? If you're just a 10-acre public farm and you're the 10th horse coming in, you understand the other horses in the farm, you understand how long they've been in that farm, and you kind of understand the risk you're taking from that perspective. But if you're the first horse to go into that public farm, you really got to put a lot of trust in the stable manager and the farm owner to basically curate an incredible collection of horses that you'll be earning revenue, right, purse rewards from. So the stabling fee's length is going to be set, the stable fee is going to be set, and then the destabling fee is going to be set. And the destabling fee is going to basically say how much does the farm owner need to pay to remove a horse off of the farm, and how much does the horse owner need to pay to remove their horse from the farm. So whichever party wants to remove their horse, and essentially prior to the expiration of the stabling contract, so to basically, end the contract, they're going to need to pay a fee in order to do so. And when you're creating this farm, you're going to be able to set what you want that fee to be for both parties if they chose to do so. So if, for example, it was between you and your friends, you might set that fee to low and you might basically have trust. We don't need to have a fee. You might set no fee and then there's no trust involved. Or you might set an incredible restriction on removing a horse and set an incredibly large fee. Or you might basically set destabling turned off and you actually cannot destable a horse with a fee. So you're going to be able to set these requirements. It'll impact, right, how easy it is to take a horse, to break the contractual agreement for the stabling, right, of a horse in a public farm. But you'll be able to set that fee. Now, I just want to get real quick into public farm gameplay as it relates to just growing a farm. As we mentioned, you can go up to 9 acres in terms of private farms. After that, you can't create a 10-acre private farm, or you can't create an 11-acre private farm. Once you reach 10-acre public farms can only be combined again with another 10-acre of contiguous pieces of land. So they can only be built in scale or size in increments of 10. So you can go from 10 acres to 20 to 30, all the way up to 100, which is the maximum size of a public farm. And that's kind of how the growth process works. So what you'll see in the game is that all private farms are between 1 and 9 acres, all public farms are between 10 and 100 acres in increments of 10. As I mentioned earlier, there's liquidity in the market. So if you chose to have a horse in a public farm, the agreement's for 2 years, you could sell that horse, but that horse is being sold with the agreement. So when the horse is sold, it's not like the relationship is broken like when you have a private farm. The relationship will still exist. So now the new horse owner will have that horse, but the horse will be in the farm. The interesting thing about that is now there's a whole new dimension to perceive value associated with a horse, because either you're selling the horse itself, but now you might be selling the horse as it relates to the horse and the other horse is stabled with it. So if someone sees that you have a horse that's, for example, I'm just going to throw an example out there. There's a horse in the public farm with you that's racing in the Kentucky Derby. You could sell your horse that's stabled in that farm with that horse, and right, how much are people willing to not just own the horse that you own, but kind of have a shared aligned interest with a horse that's racing in the Derby or another champion racehorse, right? And that relationship will be kept even after assets are sold in the secondary market. You could be the farm owner, own a 20-acre public farm with 20 horses in it. You could sell the public farm, and now there's a new farm owner, right, or stable manager of that farm that owns it now. And all these kind of pieces of gameplay of how you choose to set up your farm, all these things will play into major, right, gameplay strategy in terms of how people trust you, how people want to stable with you, and how you want to create liquidity for yourself throughout the development of your farm. After you've set the distabling fee, set all the fees of your farm, the public farm is created, you click create a farm, and the farm has been created. What happens from a technical standpoint is if the stable is its own NFT, the stable gets wrapped inside of the stable contract. If the land NFTs are their individual NFTs, they get wrapped in the contract, in their own contract as well. And now you have a new NFT that's minted from a farm contract that's given to you. It's its own NFT, it's its own farm. You could choose to deconstruct the farm, in which case you'd have to remove all the horses from it. So you'll get the stable back and you'll get the individual acres back, and you'll be able to have liquidity by selling particular acres, so on and so forth. Or you could sell the full asset on its own, and then the new owner can now deconstruct the stable themselves and do it on their own. And that's kind of how it would work. If the stable is embedded on the land, you're not getting a new stable NFT. So there's no liquidity with an embedded stable NFT, right? If your land includes a stable, it's not like you now have 2 1-acre lands that each have their own stable and you have 2 separate stables to sell. No. The way that it would work is as you combine more and more acres, that stable NFT is just one stable, right? And as the acres grow, it now opens more stalls on that stable for you to house more racehorses. So that's how all of that would work. And yeah. Now, in terms of, is there any questions in terms of private or public farms? Ben, Squid, do you guys have any particular questions you've heard that you think we should answer right now in relation to these 2 core concepts, or should I move forward?
I think you're good to go to keep on moving forward. Then we can grab some questions at the end.
Okay, sounds good, because there's like a lot to digest, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah, no, it's a ton.
Yeah. So, and don't worry everyone, the gameplay document will come out, and everything will be broken down very beautifully. We've been working very hard on it, so that'll be coming out, I think, an early version today for you all to see. The next piece is a breakdown of reward sharing. So essentially, the way that payouts will work when a horse wins a race. And this is a big question, right? How does it work between my potential syndicate, if I've syndicated my horse? How does it work between me and the other stabled horse owners that have horses in the farm with me? And how does it work for the farm owner themselves in terms of the feed they're taking? So I'm going to walk through all of that with you right now, and you'll get clarity around essentially how it all works. So theoretically, imagine it was a 10-acre public farm. The farm owner set the fee to 5%, and there's 10 horses on the farm. And I'm just going to use simple numbers right now. The numbers Dan will share on his economy anime will be a lot more exciting, I'll tell you that much. But essentially, if that farm owner set a 5% fee, and now one of the 10 horses placed in a race, for let's say it came in first place and it won, for example, $100, 5% will be $5. Farm owner will take $5. The remaining $95 will be distributed across the horse owners, right? So to go to the first owner, I'll pay them $9.50. I'll go to the second, all the way up to the 10th, if it's 10 owners, and I'll pay them those rewards. If you own 3 horses, you'll get paid for each horse $9.50. Now, as it goes to each owner, it's paying them their equal share for each horse that they own in the farm as it relates to all the horses in the farm. If it's a syndicated horse, it'll then look at the owner of the governance token and the owner of the governance token, and it'll take that $9.50 and distribute it to the syndicate of that actual syndicated horse. Just for context, I know we're going to get into another AMA, the breakdown of syndication. But the way that syndication will work, there's a lot of information, but essentially for MVP, as I mentioned, there's going to be 10 shares. There's going to be 1 governance token share and 9 partnership token shares. Each one equals 10%. Okay, so it'll be distributed evenly across all 10 tokens. If you own more than 1 token, for example, 3 tokens, you'll get paid 30% of that $9.50. And that's kind of how the payouts work. There's an order of operations. It goes to the farm owner, gives them their percentage from the purse, then gets distributed across all the horse owners, and then gets broken down to each horse, to the syndicate of the horse ownership, right? And that's how it all works. The above distribution of how kind of payouts works is applied automatically and can't be altered through players in the game. Now, just a big piece to note, as you'll see across the gameplay document, if you own a horse in a farm and you sold your racing silks, you sold your avatar, you cannot earn payouts through the game. Even though you put your horse in a public farm and that farm owner has his own racing silks, you still can't earn rewards. We can't pay you, we can't distribute, the tokens to your wallet unless there's an actual avatar in your wallet. So although you have your horse in a farm, you're sharing the profits with everyone else, someone else's horse won, as you need to have an avatar in order to earn rewards. It's key to earning actual rewards through the game. The only exception to earning payouts in the game without an avatar is if you own a partnership token. If you decide to buy a syndicated share of a horse and a partnership token of a horse, you'll still earn payouts. If you own the governance token of that horse, you will not receive payouts unless you own an avatar. So owning an avatar is really critical through core gameplay. Obviously, there's immense value in owning a Genesis avatar compared to any other avatar we might release. But owning an avatar is needed for actual payouts of rewards throughout the game. That's like a lot to digest. Just to quickly recap, we have private and public farms. Depending on the properties of land, will determine how many acres, contiguous acres you need to form a farm, whether that be private or public. It'll then include what stable's embedded on the structure, if you need your own stable for the farm creation process. You'll then assign your racing silks, your avatar to your farm. You'll create a farm. If it's a private farm, you'll put your own horses. If it's a public farm, you'll take other owners' horses in your farm. And then, as I mentioned, there's a whole payout structure associated with, kind of the structure of the farm itself. I do want to quickly touch on just stables as it relates real quick to the farms. If, for example, this is just a quick example, and it's an edge case, but it's just good to note. If you own a farm that's 10 acres in size and you bought a contiguous farm next to you that's 10 acres in size, and that farm has its own stable and your farm has its own stable, and you choose to combine them to create a 20-acre public farm, you will then have to choose which stable you want to keep on the farm The other stable that's not being used will be unwrapped from the contract, put back into your wallet, and now you can freely sell that stable from the other farm. That's a case where the actual stable connected to the farm is its own NFT. If both public farms had embedded stables in the land itself, and you combine them, right? There's no liquidity for that stable. There's no NFT for that stable that you're going to get. They're embedded in the land, so they're in the land itself. And that's important to note because it could be confusing thinking that, a stable, depending on what you're using, where it might be. If it was a embedded stable and then an NFT stable, and you chose to keep the embedded stable, then the NFT stable will be unwrapped and put into your wallet. But if they're both embedded, you're not getting an NFT from them that you could just sell, right? They're just part of the land itself, and that's how it works. That's an overview for farms as it relates to land, stables. Just so you all know, again, regions will determine a lot of these properties. So as a user developing in the game, you're going to look on a high level, right, based on where you want to develop from a region perspective. If you're developing a dynasty where you own multiple farms, you might choose to have farms in different regions for different use cases or purposes, right? And this is where all these levels of gameplay, I'm sure as you're thinking and listening through this, there are so many ways that you could diversify your risk, develop farms, strategize around where you're developing, how you're developing, and all that's going to, kind of impact the way you choose to play the game. I'm now going to dive into Skyfalls. A lot of what I said speaks to Skyfalls. I'm sure you've gathered a lot of what kind of some of the benefits of Skyfalls might be. So some of the benefits of Skyfalls, just to mention, could be the embedded structure. It could be kind of the contiguous land benefits. So, right, how many pieces of Skyfalls land do I need to own to create a private farm? How many do I need to own to create a public farm? And all of a sudden, this whole new gameplay of public and private farms really creates a really, new dimension to just the value of a piece of land itself, right? Because now all of a sudden utility associated with just 1 acre could be quite valuable. Imagine, for example, if that 1 acre was able to create a private farm at 1 acre in size and had an embedded stable on it. All of a sudden that one structure has a lot of value just for being its own structure. That 1 acre has a lot of value for being 1 acre in size. So just to recap kind of Skyfalls and kind of creating clarity around that so that everyone kind of understands core land gameplay and then Skyfalls gameplay. So Skyfalls, as we mentioned, is the capital of the Silks metaverse. I'll just throw a little bit of alpha in there right now. As we're building out the metaverse component of the game, right, the 3D component of the game, obviously traditional fantasy sports is a flat experience. You manage a roster. There's like these assets that you, trade, buy, etc., or, take off the market. So with our game, obviously, there's a flat side to it as well, which is like traditional website experience, where you're looking at a marketplace, you're looking at your roster of horses, your farm, your stable, all these things. But then there's also the immersive component to it, which is the 3D experience. As the 3D experience becomes more and more prominent, right, and the metaverse becomes more and more prominent, when you look at a traditional business, search engine is incredibly important. If you look up Silks on Google, you'll see that we do track as a number one, right, NFT project, right? We are high on search engine, right? When you look up Silks, we should be the first thing that pops up. There's a whole component to marketing associated with search engine on Google in general. Within our platform, there's a whole side to that as well. Because when you're developing a farm and you want to get people to put their horse in your farm, you're going to want to rank highly in terms of best farms to put to stable in, right? Best farms to buy from, best stable manager, best farm curator. All these things will impact your success. And as you validate yourself, that will impact the public's recognition of your success. A really exciting piece of becoming a dynasty in our game from a metaverse standpoint is you're going to be honored in our metaverse. And what I mean by that is when we say Skyfalls is the capital, the hub of our platform, we're building something called the Hall of Silks, which we'll talk to in a little bit. I don't think about it on this AMA, but on another AMA that we'll have, which is going to essentially be like the portal or the hub of the platform where all the greatest dynasties are honored. That's in Skyfalls. Skyfalls is the entry point. It's where people go to enter the game, learn about the game, learn about dynasties from a search engine perspective, to find the best ones to buy from a marketplace perspective, or to stable in from a diversifying your risk perspective, and Skyfalls is the center of that hub, right? So from owning land perspective, like everything's happening there. People are getting pushed to locations from there. Being close on the map there is meaningful. It's meaningful from a search engine perspective, from all these things. There's a lot of variables. And then from you developing your dynasty, you'll be honored in this hall. People who are learning about the game or entering this hall to go to a location will see your dynasty because you'll be honored there. And there's a lot of meaningful search engine functionality that's incorporated just from a metaverse side. That's quite exciting for gameplay. In terms of Skyfalls, as we mentioned, 45 days from the first reopening of the sale of the actual avatars is going to be on the 12th. So I'm pretty sure it's next Monday. So if you bought an avatar the first day, 45 days from next Monday, you'll be able to start claiming Skyfalls land again. Other than that, it's 45 days from when it was in your wallet. And then a week after that, right on the 19th, is when the avatar sale will end. And it's the last day that you could buy an avatar either from directly minting an avatar or from the secondary market that will have a claim. Because 45 days after that will be the last day that you could actually click claim on the website and claim a Skyfalls parcel. If you sold it after that point, sold an avatar after that point that still had a claim, the claim is no longer there because 45 days later you can't actually click claim. So that's just an important thing to note, right? Skyfall's Genesis parcels are going to be kind of the last dates to be eligible to claim is coming up very soon. I'm going to dive into now the redeeming benefits of Skyfalls. When I had the AMA around Skyfalls, there were some questions that were really great that I do have answers for now that I might have not been so clear on that I'm going to answer. So when you redeem Skyfalls land, right, Genesis parcels, you're going to get land in the Skyfalls region, right? For every Skyfalls Genesis parcel, you'll get 1 acre in the Skyfalls region that'll have all the properties I was speaking about, right? If you redeem more than 1 acre, you will get contiguous acres of land in the Skyfalls region, right? Up to 10 acres. So you could get up to 10. And then if you redeem, for example, 15 Skyfalls parcels, you will get 10 acres in one part of the map and 5 acres in another part of the map. And as you'll see in the gameplay document, we actually have visual representations of a lot of these things that will create clarity. I remember there was a question that was asked, which was, well, if I redeem my Skyfalls, parcels, am I going to get contiguous acres of land that might circle around unclaimed land or unredeemed land? Because if that's the case, all of a sudden I'm already cutting someone off, and this land that I own is more valuable because it's easier for me to either buy their land or force their hand in selling to me, or all these different variables that could be quite meaningful from a strategy perspective, from a land speculator or from a land, right, or for a land developer. The answer is the way that the actual contract is going to work is that when you click redeem my Skyfalls Genesis parcel, it's going to randomly find a location on the map. It's found an acre on the map. It's not going to mint it. Let's say you did 3 acres. It assigns that first acre, and it's found its first plotting point. It's then going to circulate around all the contiguous acres and randomly choose one of the contiguous acres next to that acre. It's found one. It's got 2. It's going to go back to the first acre. It's going to do the same thing again. One of the acres is taken up. There's 3 left. Finds the third one. Bam. It assigned 3 acres and now knows the 3 acres it's going to use to mint. And it's going to mint those 3 acres off of the contract. And you now have 3 contiguous acres. The reason why everyone who redeems Skyfalls Genesis parcels is going to get contiguous acres is because if it randomly assigned you an acre and then one of the 4, and then it goes through all of them, and it says you have 10 acres you redeemed, and the 10th acre, it says, I can't find you a place, there's no contiguous places left. It will not mint any of them. It will randomly assign another location and do the whole logic over again until it finds each person who redeems their acres, contiguous acres of land on the actual map. As I was talking about, building and developing farms, finding contiguous acres to develop, there's a lot of development required. For 1, finding the region you want to develop in. 2, getting contiguous acres. 3, developing those acres, creating a farm, and then growing that farm. All these variables, right? So to have a Genesis parcel that's going to give you the benefit of getting contiguous acres is so valuable. The thing to note though is, let's say you have six Skyfalls parcels. If you redeem 3 at first and 3 after, you're going to get 3 contiguous acres in 3 separate locations. You cannot redeem at separate times and expect for both redemptions to result in contiguous acres. You're only going to get contiguous acres if you're redeeming them collectively at once, and that's an important thing to note, right? And that's kind of that's kind of an overview. We're going to have a due date for when all the acres need to be redeemed, and then if the due date, this is kind of one of the benefits of the contract we wrote for redemption, right? If someone decides not to claim their Skyfalls Genesis parcel, they're not going to get a Skyfalls Genesis parcel. But for the redemption of Skyfalls, if you've already redeemed your Skyfalls, you'll get to choose when you want. If you've already claimed your Skyfalls, you get to choose when you want to redeem it. But after the redemption deadline, the contract will automatically redeem all the remaining Skyfalls parcels on the map, and you'll get your corresponding acre in the Skyfalls region. So that's kind of an overview of how it works, of how Skyfalls works, of how Core Land gameplay works. I'm very excited about 2 things. One, releasing this gameplay document, which will continue to get built upon. We're going to release it as a Git book at first, but then we're actually building on the website right now a native gameplay document section that'll live natively on the website, which just from our business perspective will be really great, because as new users go onto the website, they won't be pushed to a new site. We'll be able to track everything really nicely, which will be great for the company. And we'll be able to see kind of what things are confusing, what we want to build upon, and continue to refine really the core gameplay associated with the game. But I think it's something that new users are going to have a lot of answers. The community's going to get a lot of answers, and it'll shine a lot of light on all the things that are being developed. Additionally, coming up will be Dan's Economy AMA, which I've been working with Dan on getting slides developed for that are absolutely stunning and very, very exciting. And additionally, I'm going to share, as we're working on right now, a development update that is going to show early game functionality, as well as the UI UX and developments that we already have in place that'll get everyone very excited and really help continue to validate everything we're building here. So I hope this AMA was informative. I hope it provided clarity. I do know that there's a lot to digest, so the gameplay document will be very helpful for that. And if the interest is in the community to have even an additional AMA to go over a couple more of these things after the gameplay doc is reviewed, we could do that as well. I'm excited to hear everyone's thoughts, everyone's feedback, questions in general. And as always, today's Labor Day, so everyone who's on the call, I appreciate you all joining. And everyone who's listening in later, thank you all very much.
Binny, do you want to take some questions?
Yep.
Awesome.
Hi there. Good afternoon, and thank you for a superb AMA. I have just one question that I think you probably already answered, and maybe I missed it. But if you hypothetically have 30 Skyfalls and 30 avatars, and you drop them all at once, will you then be given 30 contiguous acres?
So you will receive 10 contiguous acres in 3 separate locations. So the max amount of contiguous acres you could receive are 10. So yes, you will find 3 separate locations on the map that have 10 contiguous acres. The way it works,
your algorithm will find them.
Exactly. The way it works
Gotcha.
is it's randomly assigned. So there is a possibility that somehow, it randomly assigns you both of them in contiguous locations, which would be phenomenal. But that's luck.
Right, exactly. That's random.
Yeah, it's random.
All right. So, but from there, you have been assigned 10, and then you can, if they are available, or if you can trade with someone, you can attach indefinite amounts of acres contiguously at your own expense.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Looking forward to lots more.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hey guys, thanks, Binny. You kept me busy taking notes, so appreciate all the info. My question is on redeeming. So how will we do this? Will we have to, like, for those of us that want to go in together or partner together, are we going to have to go outside of Silks to use multi-sig wallets or to figure out whose wallet we're going to use to do this, to have contiguous plots together? Or is there going to be an in-game function that will allow that? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a wonderful question. The way that's going to work for MVP is you will have to put it in someone else's wallet, and they'll have to do the redemption from their wallet. Down the road, we are definitely going to work on creating ways for people to trust each other, to share in their collective assets in ways that will enable things like this. But for MVP, you would have to put it in someone else's wallet in order to get it, essentially contiguous with their acres. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We suggest like that user is always someone trusted, one of your friends, or Silks is not affiliated on like any wallet transfers to anyone or anything like that.
Hey, Benny. Thanks for all the details.
Yeah.
Two questions, but one if you really don't have time. One is, let's say me and a friend, each one gives 5 land, similar to what Jerome asked, and then the person who owns the ownership token of the farm sells it. Does it mean that my land as well is being wrapped into this contract and being sold?
Okay, so is that like a piggyback on the last question? Just so I'm clear.
Yes, it's more specific.
Okay, so more specific. Okay, so just so I'm on the same page. Let's say you took 5 acres, your friend took 5 acres, you created a public farm together. That is one NFT now. The land is wrapped in the farm, and potentially a stable is wrapped in the farm. And your friend owns the farm, and your friend sells the farm to someone else. Your land NFTs that you wrapped into the farm with your friend are now not in your ownership or your friend's ownership. They will be in the new person's ownership.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
The other one, just a quick one. So if I have a 10 acres farm and I want to buy land around my farm, will I be able to do that?
You will be able to do that. So the way that it works, just for additional clarity, is Skyfalls is 25,000 acres. There can only ever be, right, depending on how many avatars we sell, right, over the next week and a half, as many Skyfalls Genesis parcels as there are avatars. So let's assume, right, there can only be a maximum of 10,000 ever Skyfalls Genesis parcels. I'm talking about the parcels you're going to be redeeming, which means there's an additional 15,000 acres in Skyfalls that's not going to be done through redemption. Once everyone redeems, all the redemptions are done, everyone has their acres on the map, the remaining 15,000 acres will be up for sale, okay? Those are going to be all around you. You might have acres of land that someone else owns next to you, or that Silk owns that we're selling, but you're going to be able to further develop all the land next to you on the map. So yes, once you create your 10 acres, you'll be able to build out to your, as much as you like.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Hello?
Oh, sorry, guys.
Oh,
I was on mute. Oh, sorry, guys. Just to repeat, thanks, Binny. Great job. Really appreciate it. Learning a lot. But my question is this, if we make the investment of buying land and stables, will there be additional costs, let's say like a tax or what have you, like maintenance fees for those stables or the land and the such, kind of like the way the real world works? Or is that just a one-time investment?
So that's a really great question. That's a really good question. as of right now, it's a one-time investment. So what you're getting is a farm that you're going to be able to, monetize over the next, right, X years. For MVP, there's definitely no other charges or any things you're going to have to incur any additional requirements on your end to maintain it. But the game is going to adapt and develop over the years. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's going to adapt and develop with the comments and the community's approval and people's thoughts on best approach for us to scale the platform. But as of right now, it's a one-time investment. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Benny. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, so my question is, if I were to buy on the secondary market more Skyfall plots, like right now, would those be contiguous with the 4 plots I already have?
Yep. You could it's just at the moment of redemption. So all these NFTs that are Skyfall's Genesis parcels are all considered the same, group of NFTs. So you could buy from someone else, sell, buy, whatever it is. If you have 5 in your wallet and you redeem them, they're gonna be 5 contiguous. If you have 10, there'll be 10 contiguous. If it's more than 10, you'll get 10 in one location and the remainder in another. So yep.
Okay, that answers my questions. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Hi there. Actually, my question kind of piggybacks on the previous caller. If I was to buy Skyfall on the secondary market, say I own 4 Skyfalls, right, which is 4 pieces of land. To benefit from either having stable or a farm, how many pieces of land would I need to have, and what is the actual purpose or utility of owning a farm and a stable within the game?
Okay, great question. So there are in core gameplay, there's really 2 types of farms. There's public farms and there's private farms. Public farms are farms that are essentially act as their own business where you could house other people's horses and charge them for housing their horse, right? So when the person who puts their horse in your farm, when their horse wins a race or ultimately might breed, you're going to be able to take a percentage on that horse for housing it. So the utility of owning a public farm in the game is for housing those horses and for building a business where you essentially are managing, whether it be 10 horses, 100 horses, every time they win a race, you're going to be making money. In terms of the private farms, those farms are built out for you to be able to house your own horse. So if you don't want to pay fees to someone else for housing your horse and you want to own all the payouts of your own horse, right? You don't want to share in the profits with other horses. You want to own your own horse completely and entirely. It's in your land. When it wins, you make all the money. You want to house it on your own farm. That could be a public farm of your own that you don't include any other horses in, or it's going to be in a private farm that you own that you could put your own horses in. When saying, do I need, right, a 10 pieces of land for a farm or a 1 piece of land for a farm, there are different requirements for how much land you need in order to build a public farm and how much land you need to build a private farm. In terms of standard gameplay of the platform, 10 acres is required to build a public farm where you can house other people's horses, and it could go all the way down to 1 acre in terms of private farms. So private farms are going to be traditionally between 1 acre and 9 acres in size. All the way from 1 to 9 is private. You can't house anyone else's horses, but you can house your own, or you're going to house your own. Or 10 acres is when you can now allow other horse owners to put their horses in your farm. And as I mentioned, benefits are, between public and private for you to choose. And then for stables, some pieces of land in the map will have embedded stables. Those stables will come with the land, so you won't have to worry about buying an additional asset, and you'll be able to set up your farm. And then some other stables will serve additional purposes, like inviting friends to a metaverse party or hosting an event, or even setting the requirements for your farm. So for example, when you want to build a public farm business and you want to charge a percentage, depending on the stable you use to create your farm will impact the fee you could actually set. It could impact the period of time you're allowing horses to live in your farm. And it impacts kind of the way you want to strategize around what type of public farm you want to build, what type of horse owners you want to, incentivize to put their horses in your farm. All these gameplays, strategies are going to be impacted by the way you set up your farm and the way you position your farm in the market. So all of it kind of interconnects in terms of core gameplay, and it's up to you in terms of your core focus around, do I want to build a public farm or be a farm manager? Do I want to build my own dynasty with my own horses? All these things are up to the user, and you'll have to build and develop land accordingly. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's the question. So, clarity. So, if I own, say, 4 avatars, I can mint 4 horses, and I would then get a private farm for each of those 4 horses. Is that correct?
So for Skyfalls, it's going to have its own benefits that, as we mentioned, are going to be, the hottest commodity in the game. So you can infer from the conversation that it's going to be quite valuable, and I would say that you'd be able to, definitely house your 4 horses within the Skyfalls region. So yeah, that's how it would work. What you would need to do, though, is you can't just house a horse on a piece of land. Meaning there's different NFTs, right? You have a land NFT, you have a farm NFT, you have all these different NFTs. In the actual game, when we release the MVP, the actual platform, you're going to go onto your account, you're going to look at your land on the map, and you're going to say, convert my land into a farm. And you're going to choose all the acres you own. Let's say it's 4 acres. You're going to click on them. You're going to say, convert to farm. It's going to say, what stable do you want to use to convert it to a farm? If those acres have an embedded stable, that'll be an option. You'll click on that. You'll click convert to farm. And all of a sudden, you'll have a private farm that's now housing all 4 of your horses. And it's your own dynasty in development right there.
I guess the confusion for me is where the incentive is to have a stable, because if everyone can house their own horses, why would I then house one of my horses on someone else's piece of land if I've already got land allocation for my horses? That's the confusion for me.
Okay, because a public farm allows the horse owners to share in the profits of their horses together. So depending on how you want to diversify your risk, you might choose to want to share in the profits of your friend's horses by putting your horse in a farm with them. So if you went to a public farm, when your horse wins a race, you're not making all the money. If you're in a private farm and your horse wins a race, you're making all the money. In a public farm, you're collectively sharing in the profits of all the horses together. So when your horse wins a race, you're going to make X percentage, and the other horse owners in the farm are going to make X percentage. And if their horse wins a race, you're going to make X percentage as well. So there's a lot of risk in owning 1 horse or even 4 horses. You might want to put your horse in a 50-acre public farm. So now all of a sudden, instead of being incentivized to watch only 4 horses race to make money, you can now watch 50 horses race and have aligned interest in those 50 horses by putting your horse in a 50-acre public farm. Is that clear?
Now it makes sense. You're diversifying risk, basically. You're taking less if your horse wins, but if other horses win, you're collectively sharing in that pool. Okay, it makes sense now. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's how it works. And an exciting piece of the whole thing is it could be with strangers, it could be with people you meet in the community. It'll create a community, but even with your friends, because a lot of people are interested in sharing, for example, in land together to develop farms, as we've heard a lot of questions about. But now you could even share in the profits of your horses together, which is really exciting. And when you think about like horses that are racing in big races, right? Or you think about speculation around a particular bloodline, all of that's going to really play a big factor in terms of core gameplay and how people choose to diversify their risk and which farms become popular. So it adds a whole dimension to strategy that's really exciting.
Fantastic. That sounds really exciting.
Awesome. Thank you for the question. Really, I appreciate it. Great question.
Hey boys, how you doing?
Doing good.
Yeah, good lads. Good AMA. I had a question. It's turned into a suggestion because I answered it by the time I got up. It was about claiming your land and turning them into like a contiguous lot. If you had 13 in your wallet and wanted to claim 10, I don't particularly want 3 random ones on the map. I want to keep them. So instead, I'm guessing it would be like a mint page where you just select 10 land to continuize. If that makes sense. You following?
Yeah, so you're going to be able to choose, for example, how many you want to actually convert when you convert. So it's not going to just
Yeah.
take them out of the wallet. You're going to have the option to choose how many you want to convert from your wallet.
Yeah, cool.
I might be able to show a sneak peek right now. I'll save it for the documents and for the development update, but we have like a lot of the things built out already from a user flow perspective. But you're going to basically, it's going to prompt you to redeem your land. Here's the amount of Skyfall Genesis parcels you own, 13. How many would you like to redeem right now? You'll basically set it to 10. You'll click redeem, and you'll get 10 contiguous acres in the map.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, that's exactly
Awesome. The other thing that got me super hyped was the sort of the news that sort of floated around and sort of got mentioned again today was about having sort of like an on-cyber / space pod hub that just had me missus wake up and yell at me at 3:30 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
So I'm outside. Yeah, where was I?
The on-cyber hub?
Yes, that's super cool. Really love to focus on that. I mean, it brings another asset to having a stable and another valuable part of ownership on that NFT. I just love it. Something to sort of sit around and chat and have a VR space with your friends and parties and hang your art in your stables, and sounds exciting. I don't know where you're taking it, but I'm just dreaming.
I love it, and we're going to take it as far as possible, and it's only going to develop from the community suggestions and how we build off of the MVP and so on and so forth. And that's one of the pieces that's going to be exciting about stables, even embedded on structures, right? Some of the benefits of owning land in Skyfalls might be the fact that the experience itself is more valuable than where you could find it in other regions or through other assets. And I think the metaverse piece to it, like on Cyber, for example, is really exciting because it's going to add a whole other component of customization that you could put your other NFTs up. And when you think about the relationship between, the secondary markets and the ability to buy assets that you see in the metaverse, all of a sudden, if you have a really successful, this is just a crazy thought, I just like to throw out crazy ideas. If you have a really successful farm and people are coming to your stable and it's a really fantastic stable, you could even put up your NFT art on the wall and people will buy your NFT directly from your farm. So you're getting marketing dollars to your wallet, right? Like there's a whole like layer of craziness that could happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Well, thanks for having me up, guys. I'll head back to the shadows.
Enjoy. Have a good night.
Cheers.
Bye.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great, thank you. This is more of a logistical question having to do with having multiple avatars. Right now, I have a number of them in different wallets. I clearly got that I have to put them into one and then sort of do the Skyfall's claims out of the one wallet. But going forward, let's just say, for example, I have 10 avatars. I get 10 horses. I have 10 contiguous pieces of land in the Skyfall universes. Is it going to be wrapped into one NFT that I move, or how is that going to play with the horses, the land, and the avatars?
Great question. So just to touch on the first thing you're speaking about, just so that there's clarity, when you redeem the Skyfalls, right? Let's say you have 3 wallets, and each wallet has 3 avatars, and you claim from each wallet 3 Skyfalls Genesis parcels. You now have 9 parcels in 3 different wallets. If you send 3 parcels from 2 of the wallets to one, so now one wallet has 9 parcels, but you still have 3 wallets, each with 3 avatars. When you redeem, you do not need to worry about your avatar for redeeming, meaning it's just looking at the parcels and giving you contiguous acres based on the parcels that are in the wallets. You don't need to redeem and check he has 9 parcels and 9 avatars. That relationship is not going to be made when redeeming the actual parcels themselves. So that's just the first thing. Are you on the same page with that, or is there confusion around that in Jago?
Well, to get the parcels though, it probably makes sense to put all the avatars into the same wallet and then redeem. This way, I have one say 10-acre part, NFT.
If you prefer that, then that's more than fine, but it's not going to restrict you from being able to then transfer those NFTs to your wallet separately, if you will. You know what
So
I mean?
I can then put, let's just say I do it in multiple wallets. I get the Skyfalls in a week because I purchased them right when we did the second mint. I get those airdrops, and then Skyfall, and then I put those all together in the same wallet where I have my existing ones from the first mint. Then I'd have to have let's say I have 10, put all 10 and get those mint them at the same time, right? And just to get the land.
Correct. They don't have to be
Okay.
redeemed in the same wallets they don't need to be claimed in the same wallets. When you're redeeming them, they should be in the same wallet. I just
Okay.
want you to be aware because it sounds like you've been waiting 45 days. The way that it works is it's tracking how long the avatar's been in your wallet before you could claim land. So even though these avatars have all been in your wallet for this long, if your avatar moved before claiming right now, it would reset the 45-day timer. So it's probably in your best interest to claim them separately because the avatar timer has been counting for each one in the wallets, and then send the Skyfalls parcels to one wallet. Just because if you chose to take 3 avatars from one wallet and put them in a new one, those 3 avatars are going to start the 45-day timer all over again once they're transferred.
Gotcha. I've got 1 week left, so I'm gonna wait.
Yeah, so wait, claim them, then you can move them all over. In terms of the question you asked after this, so yes, they will be wrapped, meaning if you have 3 acres of land and you turn it into a 3-acre farm, you buy a stable NFT, you have 3 individual NFTs for land, you combine them to create a farm, those NFTs will be wrapped, so they're no longer in your wallet, they're wrapped in the contract, and what you get back is a 1 NFT, which is the farm NFT. In the actual metadata, so in the description and the properties of that farm, you'll know there's 3 acres inside of it right now, and there's a stable inside of it right now. And if you chose to deconstruct it, what it would do is it'd send the 1 NFT back to the contract for the farm contract, and it would give you back the original 3 NFTs that are land and the 1 stable NFT that's a stable. So you don't have to worry about if you transferred the farm to another wallet and you deconstructed it in that new wallet or that new owner now gets all 3 land NFTs and the stable NFT. You don't have ownership over those old NFTs anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you.